I think we have a quorum, so the only person I know who told me she couldn't make it was Susan Cooper because she's off hiking in the Dolomites or something somewhere. So I will go ahead and call the meeting to order since we do have a quorum. Welcome, everybody. Again, welcome, Joe. Good to see everybody. We saw a lot of you at Pumpkin Ridge, although we were stationed at in aid station and of course Marshall out on the course, so we didn't see some of you until way late. But it sounds like a good time was had by all. So the first thing we need to do is approve the minutes from the July 8th meeting, which Deb sent to everybody. Did everybody get a chance to look at them? Okay, and I didn't see anything that he corrected. It was a shorter meeting and we discussed mostly the logo stuff, which I'm going to update you on that in a minute. So are there any discussion about the minutes or corrections to the minutes?
Bertha submitted some corrections, which I incorporated into the minutes. So okay. Those are in there.
Cool. All right.
Motion.
I would welcome a motion to accept the minutes.
I'll make a motion to accept the minutes as presented.
Carrie. Valerie seconded. All right. All in favor of approving the minutes from last month, raise your hand or say aye.
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 Any opposed? All right. Motion passes. Thank you. Good job, Deb. Okay. Treasurer's report. Debbie.
Thank you. So, let me find the one piece here. Hold on. Thought I was prepared. I got one more thing. I guess I can start with the notes. On the minutes, thank you, Deb, for putting them on there. We got another letter from the IRS this past week, just putting us off a little bit more. So we're still waiting for a response from the IRS to know exactly what's gonna happen with our appeal to them to forgive what past filings or non-filings, whatever they think we didn't do. We did do, but we're trying to get their judgment on it. So thank you for waiting. We're still monitoring that, especially. Okay, I'm going to share screen here if I can get it. Okay, here we are with our cash balances here. This is what I had sent the board yesterday, I guess. We did move as approved last meeting or the meeting before our 30,000 from checking to savings so that we have a little more growth in our interest in there, and that's good. And that leaves us currently, or as of 7/30/2025, 33,000 in our checking to cover our monthly expenses, to make sure that we are covering all the upcoming race bills and past race bills, etc. So that's what it is right now. And then I sent the budget numbers, but here's what people are interested in too. These are the race numbers. And I check these every month, so try and make sure that all of these race income expense numbers are correct, because things shift. Other bills will come in that maybe we didn't get before, things come in. And so if you as race directors see something that's amiss on these numbers, please let me know and I'll look at it again and readjust if we need to. And what I'm wondering about here is Dave's solstice run. I think we'll have a report later, but we're way over budget on that, but that's okay, because that's what we have. That's what we have our reserves for, in case we have extra expenses on that. So, but if that's not correct, please somebody let me know if there's some other things that I'm missing on that Dave solstice run. The rest of the race numbers don't look too bad. I think, Deb, if you have some other numbers on there, I think we haven't quite reconciled with each other, but I'm happy to look at anything any race directors have that may or may not look correct on those. But as you can see, as the race income is more than our race expenses so far this year. We do have an expensive race coming up, the Turkey Trot. So that may even out a little bit there, but so far we're in the black, which is a good thing. I'm gonna move up here. Few other expenses, not too much change since the last time we ran, you were able to view these numbers here. Again, the magnetic calendars we sent out, those were a little over, but that's okay here. Outreach, this is the community outreach, but not the, yeah, so we have our community outreach here, 8750. We still have just a small amount left to award in our next round, if so, and if we wanted as a board, we could approve more. We're on budget for our social runs. Last year we were starting to run a little over, but this year we've reined it in. So, but people are very happy about the social runs. I see these great pictures that come in from Joe and Carrie, right? Who's the other one? I'm sorry.
Kim,
Yeah. Kim, sorry. I knew it wasn't Carrie, but all right. Who come in. So it's really, it feels like it's a good outreach for people. So then comes our general club expenses here. Not really any advertising. We're not doing any banking fees. We're very prudent with our banking numbers, so we don't pay a lot of fees. We're doing well on that. Let's see, the office and general supplies, that I wanted to say that looks way big because it is. Because we don't have a specific, I didn't realize this. We don't have a specific line item for the member picnic. So I need to do some adjusting that and put the picnic somewhere. But for this instance today, I put it there so that we can see that we did spend that money. But it will be a little bit different next time. Let's see. I think that looks about right there.
And Debbie, this is as of July 31st?
The race numbers are current as of what I got right away, like yesterday. But these are all of July. Did I put 30? I did put 31st on there.
Okay.
Sorry, Deb, I'm gonna change that to 31st. I don't know why I was thinking 30.
That's okay. I wondered if that was what you meant, but
Yeah, it is.
I didn't want to guess.
No, yeah. Thank
Can I
you.
ask-
Okay.
Can I ask you a question, Debbie, about the marketing stuff? I wonder if it makes sense if we separate marketing materials where we're trying to sort of recruit people into the races versus member giveaways, like the magnet calendars. It feels like kind of a member giveaway. I wonder whether it makes sense for us to separate things that we're doing as a benefit for our members versus marketing, trying to outreach and get more people in the door or to the start line.
Okay, so yes, next time I can do a more of a detailed accounting of both the member giveaway, the calendars, that kind of thing, so we can do a little bit more delineation of what each of, I mean, really, I could just run the reports and put in almost every line item, but it tends to get a little long. But yes, I'm happy to break this out more so we can see what exactly is in these. When I first started here, I just didn't know. And I had to kind of make my own little categories within the categories. But now I'm, a year and a half in, we certainly can make it more, break it out more so that we can tell what exactly is going on.
I did have a question. I just realized under the races, and I know it's because we added it after the fact. We don't have the free member run in
Oh,
here.
you're right. I haven't received, well, I haven't received any registration. That's what drives me. But if it's free, I'm not going to receive any money for it. Okay. Yes.
Yeah, we will get expenses. We will get some income because it's free for members, but it's like $20 for non-members. We do have some non-members who have signed up. So
Great.
Yeah.
I'll put that one in here for next time, and we'll start to have expenses in here as well. Run sign up gives me reports every week, and that's where I get what our income is. So I'll look at that too.
Is
And
Turkey?
I know Pumpkin Ridge will have some more invoices. I think there's photography and flagging that I've not seen invoices for those yet, so.
I think I just right before the meeting saw a flagging invoice.
Okay.
And is Turkey Trot income accurate? Because I thought it was higher than that.
That's from
what
this year, not last year.
That's this year. Yeah, that's so far. That's what we have sign up and that's just now. I'm,
Okay, we need to double check that because we have
Yeah.
like 80 something people registered. So we've had
Oh.
more. So
Yeah.
for sure. There's
I'll double check that.
otherwise,
Okay, I'll double check that so that, but that's, yeah, yeah, for some reason, that's what I have in my books, but I'll definitely double check that with run sign up and what else we have and go from there.
cool.
Okay, any
Awesome.
other questions?
The only other question I had was I know we moved the 30,000 from checking into savings and then we were gonna purchase the T-bills.
Mhm.
Um, uh, and so I was wondering the timeline and when those were gonna get done.
Is that me? Oh, I'm so sorry, boy. I apologize. I knew there was something I was forgetting, and when you said that, I'm like, oh, that's what it was. I apologize. That did slip my mind. I will review the notes and get that going. I'm so sorry, everyone. Had a long fall, summer, but
Yeah. No worries.
I mean spring. I meant spring, summer. See, I can't even. But
Life is happening.
and
Right.
it's all coming back now, though. Things are smoothing out. So, and I
Cool.
got to run all weekend, so that really helps.
Good
Okay.
job.
Okay, thank you so much, everybody. Let me get this.
Awesome. Okay. So that's the minutes and that's the treasurer's report. All right. Discussion topics. We were going to finalize our event calendar, and I did get a final date from Dual. It is going to be on the 21st of July, the Tuesday. So the only event, Deb, was the Autumn Leaves. Wanted to confirm what date you were going to be doing for Autumn Leaves, if you know that at this point.
I don't know what the date is for Best Damn Run. That was still up in the air at the last meeting.
Yeah, they confirmed it was going to be
October 10th.
Saturday, October 10th. So the same.
I'm
Are we
I'm-
still gonna do the last weekend before Halloween?
Yeah, it's gonna be the last. I'm looking at a 2024 calendar. That's not gonna work out very well. Okay. I was like, that number doesn't match. So
Before Halloween is the 24th. It's October 24th, which would be 2 weeks later, which would be kind of the same timeline as this year.
that's what we want to do then.
Okay, so October 24th.
So there, and what was BDR's date again?
October 10th. So you're going to have 2 weeks between events.
Okay.
October 30th is Halloween. October 31st is the Saturday, if you wanted to have it after Halloween, but close to Halloween.
I think the other one that, pulls a lot of people is I think that's generally the same weekend as Silver Falls. Like if you push it to that weekend.
That's absolutely, I want to keep with that. Okay.
Yeah. Yeah,
So-
we don't want to compete with that one. That's another really big popular race.
Okay, so October 24th? Yeah. Okay, so October's pretty full because we're going to have the Portland Marathon Expo October 4th. Then we'll have the Best Damn Run October 10th, and then October 24th, Autumn Leaves. So it's going to be, especially for, not for Portland Marathon Expo we'll talk about, but for volunteers, they're very different locations. So I don't know if there'll be a competition for volunteers there or not. But it is going to be busy for ORRC in general. So like it is this year. Okay, cool. We'll get that finalized. We are going to go with coasters for the member giveaway. We've been working with GC in Screen Impressions. I forget what the acronym is for. And so we just told them we would get back to them as soon as we had finalized the calendar, which we have now done. I know Mark Barrett was going to present something about a beach run, but I haven't heard anything about that. And at this point, we're just going to move forward. And if we end up adding an event, we'll add it. Okay. Logo branding update. I wanted to share with you conversations that I had with Carissa, and she has just done an awesome job with everything so far. And I talked to her. We originally were going to go and look at grant applications or contact PSU or PCC, but then I had contacted Carissa, and then she got back to me, and she has agreed that she will continue working on this project for us, which is wonderful because we had wanted somebody who professionally knew what was going on with these things, and also somebody who knew the club. So this is awesome news, I think, to have her take this on. And what we talked about was first of all a timeline, and what we're going to do is she's going to continue with the work that she's already done with a lot of the logos that you saw previously in the handouts, and she's going to prepare proposals for the logos. And what was the timeline? The end of the month, end of August, right?
Early September.
Early September, so that we could contact all the race directors and say, here's our idea for your logo. And again, we are not changing all the logos. We are just tweaking them to be ORRC branded. So it's like that circle that she had presented, the logo itself that all the races have won't be changing except for maybe a shape, depending on how she tweaks it. But it'll have a circle around it with ORRC or something. She's going to come up with something great, like she already has. And she's going to present it to all the race directors and then try to get them to respond back to her.
We're going to contact them.
We're going to contact the race directors, right? We're going to forward everything to the race directors. So the race directors will be contacted by us and get their feedback on. Most of them have already said that they're fine with what has been proposed. So I think it's just going to be tweaking here and there. And then she would hopefully have responses from all the race directors by the end of September, so that we would be able to move forward. What did I say? By early October, all agreements designed final by early October, and the final deliverables of the file formats about 2 weeks after that. So, and if it doesn't work, no later than the end of the year. So hopefully we will have all of this figured out. And what I told her is, if we had been paying a professional, we know we'd be putting money out there. And I have offered to pay her $1,500 for her work, because she's going to be putting in probably 80 to 100 hours of work for all of this, in addition to all the work she's already done. And that would be less than the standard rate for a graphic designer, which is like $55 an hour or something. So this, we're getting a deal. But I want to acknowledge her hard work, and that we would normally pay a professional for this. And so I think it's appropriate for us to be paying Carissa that amount for working on these logos that she's already done a great job with. So I just wanted to update everybody on that and just see if anybody has any concerns or questions about this.
I think it sounds great. I think it's totally fair. So, from my perspective.
I also think it sounds great. Thank you, Carissa, for volunteering and being so mindful about it. And I'm particularly for Hagmut, I have some ideas that, so I'm assuming that you're welcome to race directors sending you little ideas that might be incorporated into the tweaks.
Yeah, I want your input. Sure.
I'm just gonna say, I think we're getting a great deal.
Yeah, you are. Okay, awesome. Thank you, Carissa, for doing this. Also, just a reminder, we need to get people to sign up for the Portland Marathon Expo. That's the Saturday, October 4th, before the marathon. We have 2 people signed up, but we definitely have some slots to fill. So if people can do that, that would be great. Julie and I will be doing the setup, and we'll also be doing the teardown. But we just need people to staff it. It's just the one day, so it's not like Shamrock where it's 2 days. It's just the one day before the marathon. So just a reminder to look at that Excel spreadsheet and sign up if you can. The people who are needing to know this probably aren't here, Mark, and well, Kara, you can talk to Drew. One of the things that's going to be happening, Google is implementing for certain email accounts, 2-factor authentication is going to be required. Unfortunately, and thankfully it's not all of our email addresses, because that would be horrendous. But they are requiring it for the president's email, for the technology email, and the VP of race operations email. So what that means is, if you are logging into your email account, they're going to then require you to enter like a code or something. They'll send a code to your phone and stuff. You could do what I do. I just never log out of my email account. It's just always up there. But if there's a transition in people, then we need to make sure that two-factor authentication phone number gets changed, and it's hard in a transition, especially if somebody leaves suddenly. Usually if there's a smooth transition, people are sharing phone numbers and it's not so bad, but just to let you know that there is going to be a change to some of our email accounts. So if we change people in the position, it may cause some a little bit of frustration for others and additional hassle in the changeover. So just wanted to let you know that. Okay. That's all I had until getting to the events recap. Did anybody else have anything before we get into the events recap stuff? Yes, Debbie.
Let's see. I just remembered while we were thinking about this, about the turkey trot. Run sign up holds reserve. They hold funds in reserve until you reach a certain point, then they start releasing it. So that's why we don't see the income there. That's all. It was just, I just forgot about that.
That makes a lot of sense. Yep.
Yeah.
Cool. For those of you who came in a little bit after the fact, Joe Casanova is a guest on the call here tonight. And he met Valerie at Shampooey last year. He volunteered at Shampooey, and he had expressed interest in getting involved with the club. And so I've been reaching out to him saying, Joe, are you serious? You want to do this? You want to do this? Very gracious and said he'd be interested in joining the board. And he is also going to be co-chair with Valerie and Mark Takazawa for Shampooey next year.
That's great.
Welcome, Joe. Just wanted to reintroduce you to anybody who missed that
Thank you
introduction.
so much.
Glad to have you join us.
Yeah, welcome.
Looking very much forward to getting involved in all this running stuff again.
Okay, so events recap. We had Dave's Solstice Run. We already did we did that one.
We did, yeah, but we didn't do the follow-up because July was marketing.
Oh, that's right. July was marketing. Dave's Solstice Run went really well. It was very wet. It was dry during the setup, but it was wet. You've seen the pictures, people are drowned rats, but everybody had a good time. We actually had more people register for the Solstice Run than the previous year. We had fewer people show up, probably because of the rain. So, but it went off really well. I am concerned about the loss of income, but I think we just need to tweak some things in terms of what we do for that event. Maybe not have a giveaway or something like that. I don't know. We'll need to talk with Randy about it. And Randy had said he'll do it for another year at least. Carrie, you had a meeting with Eric, and he was talking about possibly not co-RDing Pumpkin Ridge, but then maybe taking co-RDing with Randy at Solstice.
Yeah, he mentioned that because he lives quite a ways from North Plains, and so he said, I'm considering getting involved in races that are closer logistically for him. And I think the thought process is, and I don't want to speak for him, but I think he's leaning to still volunteering for Pumpkin Ridge, but maybe getting more heavily involved. And he did specifically mention Dave Solstice and Dual.
What I'll do is I'll reach out to him and ask if that's what he'd like to do, because I know Randy has been looking for a co-RD for a while.
Right.
And Solstice is also a much easier run than Pumpkin Ridge. So
yeah, we've got some work to do there, but yes, I would agree.
And Dual, for those of you who were there, Dual was great. Dual was great. Really nice to get back there in the future. Just it's pain for us on the west side to get over there. The stadium was really nice, and we had the misting station set up. That was really good. The only hiccup was that we rented the track, but not the infield, and the infield had a soccer camp workshop going on. So there were kids kicking soccer balls around, but everybody was pretty aware of it. It didn't really impact it too badly. Yeah, it went really well. So it may be at Catlin Gable, it may be at Rex Putnam again next year, depending on what Kim works out. She lives on the other side of town, so that's closer to her. So that might be a reason to move it there. But the rental and the equipment's on our side of town. So either way, she has to drive across town.
Where's Rex Putnam located?
Milwaukee.
Okay.
Yeah.
It took us we live near Hillsborough, and it took us, because it's in the evening during rush hour, over an hour to get there.
Yeah.
Didn't take us long to get home because it was later, but
Have we ever checked out Southridge High School in Beaverton for their track? They have a really nice track.
I know she was checking all over the place.
Yeah.
We had lost Catlin Gable, and there were so many people that it was approved and then turned down, and then approved and then canceled, and then, you know, all that stuff. So
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah.
All right.
But Carrie, how'd Pumpkin Ridge go?
Well, I learned so much. We had great weather. I would say it was a great weather day. We had 360 registered, which it was up from what I could tell, about 290 something from the previous year. Most of the people that I talked to on pre-registration or packet pickup the day before, which was quite a few, I asked everybody, have you run this course before? And they all said no, except for one person. So I feel like we got a lot of new people, which was good. We definitely need to heavily recruit volunteers differently for next year. I think my takeaway is that is where we were struggling the most. And if we have more volunteers along the course, it will resolve some of the little, awkward things that took place during the run, like, reminding people to turn around at the 5K mark, the 10K mark, the half marathon mark. We did try something new as far as the food that seemed to go well. We went with the approach of no cutting, no knives, everything was prepackaged so that you don't have waste. We were trying to be very mindful of that. We probably heavily loaded up the aid stations. We did have some cut fruit at the aid stations that, interestingly enough, was not a real big draw for people. And so we're going to really change that next year. We had the course certified. So the half marathon is a certified course. And I think it worked well where the start finish line was versus the previous year. So there were some really good things that took place. And then just a big learning experience of some things that we would do differently next year. So, but all in all, we made some money on the race. I think at the end of the day, we'll probably net a profit of maybe about 3,500. I'm hoping is where we'll end up, which is more than what we thought. But I just was encouraged that we had a lot of new people and that the registration numbers were up from the previous year. So yeah, so I thought it was good. And Tracy and Julia were so helpful. I learned all sorts of things about how heavy the parking pieces are to set up the parking lot. And I don't know how many thousands of pounds we all lifted, but it was a lot.
Bases of the delineators, those are the big of our resistance.
It was crazy. I already have thoughts on how do you load the truck differently. I mean, they're all the little things that go through your head after the fact. So, but overall I had a really good experience, and I'm looking forward to next year. And I've already reached out to some nonprofits to see if we can start working earlier to recruit those summertime volunteers. So,
and thankfully it didn't take place this past weekend where there was a train derailment.
I know, I heard about that.
Yeah.
It was awful. So yes, we were very, very lucky. So all in all, I think it was a very good event. So
talking about volunteers, Carrie had contacted us about volunteers, and we probably need to have a discussion about this again amongst the race directors, maybe at the next race director meeting, but also as a board. Right now, we pay groups of volunteers $25 a person for a 4-hour shift, minimum of 4 people. And we've had it that way for a couple of years. And Carrie had some comments about it's less than minimum wage, which yes, it is.
yeah.
But you're volunteering, and that's the whole point where you can raise money. But if it's getting harder to attract some of the high school groups, I mean, some races are having no trouble attracting the high school groups. So I don't know if it's the timing. I think summer events are harder.
Yeah.
But having a discussion about possibly increasing the amount that we would donate. Carrie, you also mentioned, for example, that Mark pays the pancake people at Ralph's Run $1,000. And I think there's a difference between donating part of your proceeds to an organization,
right,
to pay volunteers.
Mm-hmm.
But that's something that, as we were looking at one of our next newsletters, we're doing a history of Best Damn Run.
Mm-hmm.
And one of the things we did is we donated funding to certain organizations, specifically kids sports teams in Pasadena.
Right.
And so I'm just wondering if there's some other way we could kind of attract
I'm very interested in doing something similar for Pumpkin Ridge. You know, like if there is a specific organization, and I know that Ralph's Run, there's a tie to the organization that helps with the kitchen. I do know that part of it. But I think that if we could focus in, and maybe it's different for each race, the needs are different, the volunteer needs are different. But Pumpkin Ridge is one, now that I've done it, and I'm by no means an expert on it, that's a big enough race. I could see Vernonia. There are certain races where the courses are big enough where maybe you do want to focus in on a group and give them a little bit more incentive to do it. I was very surprised, and just for the group, the reason it came up is I've been asking for referrals to local nonprofits that might be looking for fundraising opportunities. Actually having somebody help make a connection, you know, so that we can talk about, or, you know, are there volunteer opportunities? And when I was explaining the program, the $25 per person per hour, they're like, that's like that in today's, you know, environment, that's not very much. And I was kind of taken back by it. 'Cause I'm thinking, oh, I'm excited that we do this fundraising. So that was the first comment that I faced after Pumpkin. But then when we were doing the pre-registration pickup, one of the volunteers that was helping said that, you know, her comment from a family member that also participates in the races and actually did Pumpkin Ridge was not interested in volunteering because they didn't feel the $50 credit was enough for the number of hours that you were making commitment. And that was more of the comparison to the minimum wage. I was just surprised by that because I have always thought, wow, $50 credit towards a race. I've always thought that was quite generous. So I was just a little bit surprised. So I'm trying to get my wording down. Like, how do you work through some of these conversations that best supports the club and positions us right? But overall, as far as the volunteers, and I think each race is different. I think we have similar needs, but there are differences. When I look at the individual volunteers, race after race, what I see happening is we have the same people that are individually volunteering very consistently, very faithfully, very dedicated. But we also need to be looking at growing that population as much as we need to grow the group volunteers, because at some point, some of our faithful volunteers are not going to probably be able to do that. Some of the commentary that I got from Pumpkin Ridge was, am I going to be a course marshal where there's a restroom nearby? You know, things like that that people think about. And so we've got to make sure we've got the right people positioned in the right spots and that we're recruiting and growing that area of the organization. So those are things that have been on my mind since Pumpkin Ridge. So
Valerie,
Really quick, I know we're probably not doing it tonight, but my suggestion would be part of that discussion is letting each race director have a little more autonomy and with the goal of still making a profit. So if one race wants to pay $1,000, that's on them, you know. But
yeah, no, I
our
don't
races
disagree.
are so unique and different that
Yeah, what I totally agree. What works for one. And the other thing that you have to consider is with Mark's race, the Ralph's Run, it's the kitchen group. They're doing some pretty heavy lifting that not a lot of the volunteers would be comfortable doing too. So there's a value in that as well. So I think all that has to be taken, you know, tailored for each race.
It's also linked up with his mission, which I feel like gives it an entirely different flavor. Forgive the pun, because they're the kitchen group. But yeah, I mean, it's tough because it's really interesting that you bring this up, Carrie. And there's a whole like culture in trail racing that people pay it forward by volunteering, and they don't expect anything besides a good time and a t-shirt.
There you go.
And so, yeah, it's interesting to hear that people don't even feel the $50 is worth it. I can't tell you how many race times I volunteered for races that I never even used my $50 race credit in the past. So
I will share with you, one of the reasons why I first volunteered was I found out that there was a credit and I thought that's really cool. And while I may not necessarily personally, I'm not necessarily looking for that discount, I just thought it was a really cool offer to reward people for helping the club. And so that was what got me involved actually to volunteer to begin with. And I wasn't even looking for the $50 credit. I just thought it was really cool. So I just was taken aback, and I thought I need to be prepared for the, like, how do you work work through those conversations with people in a meaningful way. You're not offending them with, this isn't worth it for me because it's less than minimum wage. How do you honor their, what's true to them and still uphold what we're trying to do as an organization in a good way? So.
I mean, it also could be a tiered thing depending on, I will say that I thought the $25 was fair because usually, even despite my efforts to make the shifts at least 3 hours, sometimes they're barely 3 hours long. They're not actually 4 hours long. And there are times where the shifts I've seen, there's an equity issue with how hard different shifts are, whether you're moving heavy stuff, how long they are. So, I mean, I think it's great if race directors can try to even them up so that they're all around the same amount of time-ish. So you don't have a 1 hour shift versus a 5 hour shift or something. Or you get double credit if it's a double length shift.
Also, these are kids in high school that are getting volunteer hours for the graduation requirements.
Right.
So
Right.
it's not, you know, it's not the same thing as a minimum wage job.
Yeah, exactly. They would be volunteering whether there was a $25 credit or not.
Exactly.
Right. I totally agree. So anyways, those are some of my experiences this last couple weeks.
Definitely have that discussion.
So for groups, what the groups that are volunteering, it's $25. What if that's the minimum? And then, like Valerie said, it's up to the race director to supplement based on, how work. Would that work?
I think I think we need to have a discussion, Mark, about what that would mean. I mean, and it might be something as simple as instead of $25 per person, you just you provide us with a minimum of this many volunteers and we'll give you a flat dollar amount. All depending on what the event can afford and how many they need, or some races like Best Damn Run, they had multiple groups reaching out, or at Turkey Trot, we have more groups than we know what to do with because they're all trying to get their requirement in at that point. So I think it's going to involve a discussion from all the race directors of what are your needs and how do you think you can best meet it and still make a little bit of money so you're not losing it.
Yeah.
And just to play devil's advocate, if we do increase it, that we're going to pay them, what about like a no-show fee? Because
a no-show fee,
depending on groups, and then they don't show up.
I would need to think about that one.
There's no way to enforce that. That would be hard.
I mean, I closely tracked who showed up at my shift at AG, and if they didn't show up, they didn't get the credit. I only paid
that was hardcore.
Showed up and did their shift.
Yeah, the hard thing I understand with both Mark and Carrie had a situation where they had volunteers sign up and then they didn't show.
Right.
And so you are expecting people in certain places and then suddenly you're in a bind. What do? You get to stretch people out.
Right.
Other events have more people than they need and they're struggling to find stuff for people to do, which.
Yeah. It's just the nature of what's going on, I guess. So each race is different. So.
Yep. Okay, so our upcoming events, we have Best Damn Run coming up October. No, we have Member Run coming up Labor Day. And Carrie,
how many people do we have so far?
We have 41 so far.
Okay.
We had capped it at 200, but that was when we thought we had 2 porta potties. We went over the course last week and there's only 1 porta potty. So we reduced it down to 150. We're not, we're probably, we have a bet going on as to how many people we think are going to show up. But we're going to start sending out some emails specifically to members, reminding them about it coming up and stuff. And if we have 100 people sign up and 80 show up, that's what I'm betting. We'll be happy. Julie doesn't think we're going to get that many.
I think it'll be the size of Dave's.
We think it might be closer to the size of Dave's Solstice Run, but it'll be fun. Randy did not use his gift cards at Solstice. He forgot to hand them out. So we have 2 $25 gift cards to Foot Traffic to give out as prizes. And we need to go out and buy cards. So playing cards so people have something to pick up at the turnaround stations. So that'll be fun. And then Best Damn runs October 11th, and their numbers are slightly ahead of last year. So that's good. Autumn Leaves, Deb, Joel, how's that going?
Hello?
Unmute. Well, we don't have that many registrations. It's very, very slow. I have been very distracted this summer with getting ready for some work getting done on my house. So I have not given it the attention it needs with doing marketing. Jill and I are going to talk after the meeting here.
Oh,
So
we will. We got 25 signed up right now.
we have what?
25 signed up.
Yeah, I mean, if we keep our expenses bottom basement low, we might still break even. I mean, we've already decided we're gonna like hand time it. We can't afford to pay a timer that's gonna charge us $2,000. So, no. Yeah. So we gotta step up the marketing online. And
If you're gonna hand time it, I would contact Jeff Weirman because he has that hand timing system that we used to use for 12th and Valley, 12th Hills Parks and Rec.
yeah.
And that's just a push button.
In Ultra sign up, since we are using them as our platform for registration, they actually have their own kind of pretty easy to use timing platform that's free.
Cool. Awesome.
We have to make sure that we have to test and make sure we can have internet service that we can work it.
Yes, we'll work
Okay.
on that for sure.
Okay.
Cool. All right. Well, great. So just a reminder to sign up for Portland Marathon Expo if you can. And for race directors, we're going to be taking any swag that you can give us to give away to people. And Carrie, did you and Eric and Hal agree that we could just take everything you have left over for the pumpkin?
I don't know that we're all in agreement, but we're not going to probably use them again because we're going to be changing the logo. So there are many, many, many sweat towels. And
Cool.
there's a lot of medals if you want them, but I don't know that those play so well at the marathon, but for certain there's
Lots
plenty
of towels.
of towels. Yeah. They're at the storage unit, so I would just grab them. So,
Grab them.
yeah.
Sometimes it's like the medals.
Yeah.
You'll take the medals too.
Well, we'll take them. It doesn't hurt to have them because sometimes
Right.
kids, when you're at the expo, the kids like the
Yeah.
medals.
There's plenty.
And it's pumpkin, so it's like October, Halloween. You know, I like them.
Yep, I think that's great.
All right. Anything else for the good of the order? Any questions at all?
I
Cool.
just had one just kind of thought. And is Joe on the call?
Joe Casanova?
No, Dudman?
No, Joe did. Nope, just Carissa.
Okay. Well, I was just thinking, like, a lot of times, like, if like for the Red Lizards, when they do their like fall and summer kind of series, like when we're included in those races, that helps our numbers quite a bit. And would Joe be a good person to see like how you get included in that series, or who do you think that would be a good contact for that?
Joe would be my first suggestion because he's a member of it, but I don't know who else is involved with the.
You hear me?
Just to,
This is Carissa. So what were you asking about the lizards? I'm a member also, and I can ask Joe if you want me to.
oh yeah, just like I mean, I haven't been a member for quite a while, but how do they still do that kind of summer and fall Grand Prix?
Oh
where
yeah, they called it the summer series, and now they're calling it the spring into summer series because it always actually started before summer.
Well, I just like sometimes when we're like our races end up on that.
Yes, in the past, sometimes ORRC events were selected to be part of that, like up the Lazy River, which we don't do anymore.
Yep.
And Duel has been on it before too.
Is there a way like would that be like a good opportunity for us to boost our numbers at the races that might be a little bit below what we want them to be, or?
Yeah, it could be. So I've been on the summer series committees before in which I was one of the people who would suggest races. So yeah, I mean the lizards tend to like be competitive. So they'd want a timed race. They typically they often ask if they could get maybe a little bit of a discount for their members, even if it's $5 or $10.
They might like Best Damn Run because it's a fast race. I don't know if if they want a timed race, they might not like autumn leaves as much because it's gonna be hand timed.
That's true, but
And I think a lot of, I mean, unless they've changed it, a lot of them are like half marathon distances or less.
yeah, it kind of changes, like evolves over time, depending who's kind of promoting that or who's on the committee. Sometimes, yeah, it just depends on feedback. Like sometimes they'll get pushback like, oh, we don't want to travel far, you know, or we don't want the most expensive races, but you know, it just depends. So, yeah, even
There's
if
the,
even
there's
if it's
the-
not, sorry, even if it's not part of their summer series, you can get in touch with them and still offer them like something like a discount or just to be advertised, you know, you could do that.
another option would be offering other RRCA affiliated clubs a discount to our races, like $5 discount. If we're really trying to promote, like Eastwind Running Club is in Gresham, so they're closer to Best Damn Run, for example.
Yeah.
So that could be another idea.
Yeah.
Of cross promotion. I mean, is Team Red Lizard an RRCA club?
No.
Okay.
You also, for like Shampooey, might contact the Salem Running Club.
Mhm.
Say, hey, we'll offer.
Good idea.
Okay.
Great.
Cool. Thanks, Joel.
Okay.
All right. Well, I think that's it for tonight. Nice
Do you
short.
have any topics for next meeting that I should put down?
The deadline for community outreach grant applications is the end of this month, so we would be reviewing any applications that we get in September. I don't know, most of the people who had them last year were already approved for grants at our last March meeting. So I don't know if we're gonna get any, I'm gonna send out some reminders to some of the organizations that we've given it to before who haven't applied yet for this year. But so that's one thing that we may have grant applications to review. Otherwise, I can't think of too much. We'll just update everybody on the member giveaway, see how that's going, and we've ordered other supplies for the expos and. Yeah. All right. Well, then I will go ahead and adjourn the meeting. Thank you, everybody, for attending. Thank you, Joe, for attending and volunteering to co-RD Shampooey, and looking forward to working with you.
It's a pleasure. Thank you. I look forward to meeting you all in person.
Yeah. All right. Good night, everybody.
Thanks, everyone. Have a good night.
Good night.